If there's one thing that's been more on the minds of Payday 3 players recently than anything else when it comes to things that the game needs in the next few months, it's offline mode, a feature that was touted as a big part of Operation Medic Bag, the 2024 long scheme to try and bring Payday 3 to a place where it should have been when the game launched. But that feature has not arrived, and with Operation Medic Bag being brought to an end at the end of 2024, the very common and very fair question is, what happened to the offline mode? And we haven't really got much information from Starbreeze. So what I want to do in this video is go over a very brief history of what's been going on with the offline mode situation, what was promised, when it was promised, where we're at now, and also my frank analysis as to what I think of the future of offline mode. Will it even come? Is it going to show in any way based on what Starbreeze have said previously? Or is it being swept under the rug and will we never actually see it in the game? Let's just talk about it all in today's video. So you're all up to speed, you know what's going on, and we'll see what's coming down the line. Now, one thing that is important that I will get to in terms of dates later is the most recent bit of information that I know, or that we know, is that they are planning to address offline mode in the coming weeks, and that was posted 3 weeks ago nearly. So we are waiting on some information here. We haven't had it yet, but at some point, hopefully, it will come. But I want to go over everything here. So, as a very brief bit of context before we get into the actual evidence and all the bits I've got, Payday 3 is an always online game. You have to have an internet connection to connect to it. It was a feature that the community, content creators, everyone bit back against when Payday 3 was in the lead up to its launch as a terrible idea for a number of reasons. For one thing, the biggest reason being, anything you do in Payday 3 has an expiration date if there's no way to play offline, because eventually, the servers will go off, and Payday 3 doesn't have peer-to-peer connection. It's all server dependent. You turn those servers off, no one can play the game, and that's it. The money you spent, the time you spent, it will mean nothing once that happens. Now, to some people, that's fine, and people will go, you know what, I had a good amount of time in the game, I can't play anymore, but I'll always cherish the memories I had, and if you feel that way, fine. But it's very common and very fair to believe that anything you pay for, you should always have access to, and any time that a gaming company has pulled that access away, be it turning the servers off for an always online game or revoking access and different things, there have been stories in the gaming industry, especially over the last few years. It's rightful for consumers to not be happy about that, and so with Payday 3, a sequel to a game that had a fully functional offline mode that a lot of people used, whether you want to play on your own quickly and easily without worrying about matchmaking, whether you live somewhere that has a really bad internet connection or at least an intermittent one, so you play constantly with high ping. When I do a lot of my solo stealth streams, Payday 2, or when I did them, maybe I'll start bringing them back to be fair, but I always did those offline. It was quick and easy to do, and it allowed me to get in, and if I had any kind of internet connection problems, I wouldn't lose where I was in the game, and that was really, really good. So whether you got good internet, bad internet, whatever your preferences are, offline mode is very important, but Payday 3 didn't launch with one. It went always online despite everyone's criticisms, and eventually that blew up in their face when the servers went to absolute hell in the opening week of Payday 3's launch. Since then, Starbreeze have been talking about the potential of an offline mode, a way to get into the game without requiring an internet connection, and we got partway along with that. So let's jump in with the context of Operation Medic Bag. This was the operation announced over a year ago now. Do you feel old? This was announced just over 12 months ago, and it was the big scheme, as I said, across 2024 to highlight key things they wanted to do with the game. Progression overhaul, we got that. New content through DLC, some free heists, we got that. UI revamp, while it's arguable it wasn't the best revamp ever, it did make the menus look a lot better, even if the actual organisation was fairly similar, if not the same. Stability, matchmaking, and server browser, we got the server browser, although it's still got a couple of bugs. Matchmaking seems to be a bit better, a bit more stable, could be a bit faster, but we're getting there. And then we had solo mode and offline mode. These were the 5 big improvements planned for 2024. Solo mode did come, and it's still a beta, but offline mode didn't show. So what I want to do is first off just read what they said about solo mode and offline mode again, since it's been a year and I think it's important to reset that context. It is clear to us the community wants the ability to play Payday 3 reliably and on your own terms. In order to meet that need, we'll be doing 2 major changes to the current implementation. Firstly, developing a standalone solo mode that you can get into without going through the matchmaking flow. This will be a local game on your own machine, thereby circumventing the need to connect to a server. And this was partially implemented through solo mode phase 1 in June of 2024. It will still require an online connection to our backend systems progression, unlocks, etc., but it does skip the matchmaking queue. You get straight into a game on your own, job done. Phase 2 will look to improve the solo mode implementation and allow you to play the game without requiring a constant internet connection. You will need to connect intermittently to our backend to upload your progression, but will otherwise be able to play offline. We'll need to come back with details on how exactly this will pan out. So like Payday 2, you play an offline heist, when you get out of it and go back to the main menu, it'll save your progress, update with the cloud or whatever it may be. That would be fine. And if you didn't have an internet connection, then eventually when you regained one, you could upload your progress then. That would be perfect. They say that as playing co-op will always be dependent on connecting to another machine somewhere, we're seeking to implement the solution that provides the best balance between reliability, latency, and overall experience. Our technical leadership have been evaluating options for the past months and we'll be able to share more details on the solution in the near future. So Obviously, that didn't happen. This was 12 months ago. And while the Starbreeze dev team has worked around the clock to add a lot of really important stuff to the game over the last 12 months, whether it be the free content, bug fixes, improvements, and other bits that Operation Medibag mentioned, this is one thing that went dreadfully unmentioned once solo mode came out in beta in June. And still, when you play solo mode in Payday 3, it says solo mode beta as a watermark in the corner. I've no doubt there's a PC mod that probably turns that off, but on consoles, that's still there. That beta's been going on for 8 months now. So what happened after that? Well, Payday 3 occasionally acknowledged that offline mode was happening, like this tweet 3 months later that said that it was in the works, so it was coming, but we didn't really know much at that point. The next big thing, though, was this report here. Sorry for the flashbang, probably should have warned you. This was the Q3 financial report for Starbreeze, which is the infamous one that announced the reduction of staff and funding for Payday 3. And while that is an important part to this video, and I know people probably get sick of me mentioning it over and over again, if you don't already remember, they did acknowledge that Operation Medibag was being rounded off for Payday 3. That's the important thing here. Matt Sewell, the acting CEO, said, in the coming months, the level of investment will be lower as we round off Operation Medibag for Payday, basically suggesting by the end of the year that operation would be over. Or I guess technically maybe with the addition of Jacket coming months, maybe November to February, I guess, I don't know. But point being is Operation Medibag has come to an end, and therefore they've entered year 2, which technically started in September, October 2024, with a smaller team focused on continuously updating the game with new content. And they did already say that the level of investment during Payday 3's first year on the market through DLCs and Operation Medibag was at an elevated level, and so now in year 2 they're confident being able to continue delivering amounts of value to the players with a significantly lower level of investment. That's already kicked in, the lower level investment, the smaller dev team, so it's safe to say Operation Medibag has come to a close, and that is why offline mode's become a bigger point of topic in the last few months, because as I said, that was touted as a big part of not only 2024's improvement highlights, but just Operation Medibag generally. That whole thing, one of the biggest pieces was offline mode, and arguably one of the most important parts. I think maybe progression and offline mode were two of the most popularly talked about things, as well as obviously just getting new content, but that's not even an Operation Medibag thing, that's just per se something that a live service game should always get. So I'd argue out of those, all the key things here, these were the two most important or most talked about ones. Progression addressed fairly quickly. Is it the best progression system in the world? No. Is it a damn sight better than launch? Yeah. Solo mode, does it work fairly well for what it is? Yeah. Is it offline mode? No, it's not. And so, as I've said, over the last few months, the argument has gotten stronger and stronger and stronger. What's happening with offline mode? Where's it gone? Is it even happening? And the most recent things we've seen are, first off, this particular tweet and also a Reddit video, which was taken from one of Almir's live streams. So let's go over each of those. So this is the Where We Are section. Earlier this month, Payday 3 replied to someone called ChatGPT and said, we will address offline mode in the coming weeks. It's a serious topic the community is serious about, and we need to address it seriously. How many weeks is that? Well, as I said, it's, 2.5 weeks at the minute. We've still heard nothing about it. So who knows? Maybe it'll be this week, next week, the week after. We don't know, but it's coming at some point. We just don't know the timeline, much like with Payday 3 updates at the minute. You know, we know, for example, that right now the next update is going to contain Armor 2.0 because Almir mentioned that offhandedly on his Twitter. It's slightly annoying that this is the kind of place you have to go to get this information. Nothing against Almir, obviously. I love the guy. I respect him immensely, but I still would argue that communication and how it's communicated is not great and needs improvement. Namely, just releasing notes from streams would be really useful. Someone officially doing that rather than having to rely on Mage in the Reddit, who does good stuff, but it shouldn't be left to him to do it. Either way, point being, we had that tweet saying they're going to address it seriously, and then a mere, I think 6 days later, or even less than that, I think it was only a couple days even after, Almir did a stream and offline mode came up in the conversation. So what I want to do is play this full clip so you can hear everything he said and you can get a bit of an idea about where we're at situation-wise. So let's roll that clip.
We said on Twitter that offline mode is something we haven't touched on since we initially discussed it. We will share additional details regarding how that would look, whether or not it will happen, whether or not it's peer-to-peer, whether or not it's full offline mode, whatever, because we haven't said anything about it. And it's a serious topic that requires a serious answer from us developers. So we'll get back to you on that. I don't have any additional details as of now, okay? But I really appreciate you bringing it up. I don't want to share any details regarding it. I don't want to say anything now because I want to give the developers the time they need to find the best way forward for Payday 3. I would not do my job if I would try to appease you now and say, yeah, offline mode is exactly going to happen the way you think. That's not true until the developers say that it can be so. You know what I mean? So please, I get it. It's a super serious topic for many heisters, but that does not mean that I'm gonna try to sugarcoat anything or trying to do like a white lie where I say, yeah, we're gonna do exactly what you want. Just buy Payday 3 now. No, if you haven't bought Payday 3 yet because offline mode is a huge topic for you, I get that. And I suggest you don't buy it until you know for sure what's gonna happen. It's as simple as that, right?
I think it's fair to say this clip had some good and it had some bad. Almir being frank and saying, look, if you want to buy Payday 3 only when offline mode is added, don't buy it until you hear more about it. That I really respect. Also him saying, I'm just doing my job and I don't want to be leading you in any kind of false directions. I really do respect that too. Unfortunately, he says he doesn't want to say anything, but the opening of the clip I think is the worst bit because he said how that will look, whether or not it will happen. That was the key thing to point out there. And, we've talked previously about Almir, some of his statements on streams. Now, sometimes they can be misconstrued, but he's very much left the door open there in that message. And he's a smart guy. I think he's done it intentionally in order to say it may not happen. Whatever we say in whatever direction, we'll let you know when we have the actual information, which to me is concerning enough to say, okay, well, this was promised as part of Operation Medic Bag in 2024. We're in 2025 and it's not happened yet. It seems like there's a decent chance it's not going to happen now. And I think this is the kind of thing, these are the kinds of messagings that set you up to be ready for that. It's like preparing you for the fall almost, because it does seem to me like he's very much at least trying to sit on the fence and not go one way or the other because he hasn't got the information to share. And I don't think he's going to get good information to share. I think it's going to very much be a case of it's not coming and you're just waiting for that announcement. It might sound like it's negative, but I just think the wording of some of that, if you really pay attention to it and properly piece what he said together, that's the direction he seems to be going in. I respect what he's trying to say, and I like that he's been honest and said, look, if offline mode isn't added, don't buy the game, because he knows that's an important part, but, just because he knows that doesn't mean it can suddenly magically make offline mode be added. And that's why I want to get to my main point here, which is combining this with flashbang warning, what we know already about the current state of Starbreeze, the reduced staff numbers, the reduced investment, a quarter of the devs going off to make a PUBG crossover of all things. Starbreeze are not in a situation right now where they've got tons of developers to hand to do everything they need for Payday 3. They have got to try on a very small dev size, figure out what exactly they need to do with Payday 3 as a priority. Is it adding content? Is it trying to make money for the game by releasing more DLC? Is it just adding free things, tweaking menus? What is it that Payday 3 needs most? Also, what have they got the resources to execute? If they say, for example, that offline mode is the most important part of Payday 3, have they actually got the staff and the correct types of staff, so correct developers who can handle internet-based things, offline-based things? Because not every dev is a one-size-fits-all. Some people are good at UI, some people are good at creating props, some people are good at the back end, the matchmaking. Have they got the actual staff to hand who can make these things happen? They could sit in a room and say offline mode is the most important thing, but if they don't have the staff or the funding to do it anymore, they're kind of backed in a corner with nothing to do. They're up a creek without a paddle. There's nothing they can do, and their hands are tied because the executives have decided to chug the funding and the staff away from them. There is more to this than just Starbreeze promising something and not delivering. I think there could be some genuine intention to do it that just hasn't happened. You could, of course, argue, well, they've had until the end of year one to add it, why didn't they? And I think that's a very fair point. Again, I think maybe it comes down to priorities and also the fact that Starbreeze did have to get out every single paid DLC before year one ended because that was part of their contractual obligation with the Gold Pass, etc, etc. So whether you like it or not, they had to focus on that, and I think because of that, the Herculean effort that offline mode is probably going to be fell off the back burner. Because everything is tied to Nebula. This is Starbreeze's back end that progression is tied to, that the internet connection is tied to, the servers, all that stuff. It all works around a system they've built for a game that would run crossplay but force you to be online and has not had the best matchmaking over the last year. It's gotten better, as I said, but this is a system they've been getting used to through Payday 3. They don't have the experience of running a big server-driven crossplay game like with Payday 3. Everything else is run differently until now. So it's not something they can just fix instantly. They've got to work in the back end to get offline mode to even function, if they even can, and then actually have the time and resources and staff to make it happen. And I just don't think they managed it last year because of everything else they focused on doing, namely the DLC releases, and then still trying to add some free content to make sure the people who hadn't bought the Gold Pass didn't start moaning about not having free content. Valid moaning, don't get me wrong, but I'm using moaning as a general term. So I think, unfortunately, what we've got is a situation where they spent so much time making those DLCs to make sure they met those obligations, and then the Starbreeze execs went, hey, by the way, that money, that staff, you don't need that. PUBG can have that, or Baxter can have that. And now when they're in a better position to maybe do things like offline mode, they no longer have the funding or the staff to do it. I don't think, personally, in my heart of hearts, knowing what Starbreeze is like, I don't think it's some vindictive thing where they've promised offline mode and just decided not to deliver it. I think, unfortunately, it is, quite literally, as the book goes, a series of unfortunate events, and I genuinely do not think offline mode is going to come. So to answer the overall question, I honestly am preparing myself for an announcement that offline mode is not happening, and that breaks my heart because it does mean that if this game never does pull itself back, which, at the minute, it's still not quite managing to do, I'm not saying it to be negative, I'm saying because it's true. They got the extra influx of PS Plus players, but is that going to make a big difference long term? Who knows? If we suddenly find out in a Q1 report that they've buffed the staff again, maybe it's a result of that, great, we can celebrate that then. But right now, there's no real evidence based purely on people talking about the game, the amount of people playing, and what they've been talking about with Payday 3 and what's coming, and the lack of real timeline of anything other than, Armor 2.0 is in the next update, whenever that is. You haven't got a lot to go off to give you that hope, and as Almir always says, they have to prove what they're doing by actions, and their actions right now are very few and far between because they don't have the staff and funding to do very frequent actions. I hope this all makes sense. I'm basically just trying to give a logical explanation as to why I don't think it's happening. It's not, I think it's going to be the worst case scenario, even though a lot of it's felt like that recently. I think genuinely we're in that worst case scenario possibly because of just everything else that's happened. I think it's just dominoes collapsing one onto the other and it having consequences. That's just the way I feel it's going to be. So if you ask me for my personal opinion, if I think offline mode is coming, I would say it'd be a lovely surprise if it does, and it's not impossible it could eventually turn up, but I'm not particularly confident it's ever going to turn up. I think Starbreeze are those kind of people who like to tease things that are happening and get ahead, like even Almir just saying Armor 2.0 is still coming. Things like that can make a big difference to making sure these things are still happening, especially if they're not meeting the timelines they should have met, because that was meant to come out in November, December I think, and hasn't. So reminding you that it's happening, I like that, and confirming it's the next update. They like to tease things. When they have a bit of confidence that something's going to come at some point fairly soon, they can tell you. They haven't done that with offline mode. They haven't ever really given a proper timeline as to how close offline mode was to being accomplished. So the idea they could get to that point now, I find hard to believe. I find hard to put my faith in, and it's a real shame, but that's where my head's at. But I did ask all of you for your opinions, so I thought to finish this video off, I'd just get a few opinions from this post. Thank you to the 89 people who left comments here. I really do appreciate it. As we've done previously, I'm just going to go through some of the top ones, but only a few of them, just to get the overall vibe. I'm going to look for the most liked ones, because that would usually tell me what you guys have agreed with. The top comment is, my assumption is they have at most one person looking into ways of implementing offline mode, but they aren't committing to any promises anymore. And that would fairly sum it up. They can't commit to promises on things they can't deliver. Only one person looking at implementing offline mode. That could be true. As I said, devs are not one size fit all. They could be working on different things that are more accustomed to their particular skill sets. It could be there's only one or two people on the team now who know how to handle Nebula stuff, and maybe they're looking at other things to do with the servers, improving server stability, matchmaking. I mean, Starbreeze said that they were moving to, I think, a different server provider, or at least more strengthened servers by the end of 2024. I don't know if they ever actually successfully finished that, because I don't think they ever actually declared it was done. They said they started it around June, but they never really said it was finished, so who knows if that actually has happened. I'm not saying it hasn't, but you see what I mean? There could be other things they're working on that maybe they think, based on the number of people they have, should just take precedent because something like offline mode is too big a task for so small a crew. Also got Nick here saying, my guess is that on Operation Medibag they were at least trying to implement offline mode, but everyone was moved to Project Backshots, get it right, because management has the attention span and foresight of a 5-year-old high on TikTok and vitamin gummies. Well, I'm not going to rush to disagree with you. As I said, I've got nothing personal against the executives at Starbreeze, but their choices definitely have choice words for. I've made no bones about that. I mean, half of that being the reason that I left the program. Well, what I mean, half of that, pretty much all of that. But as I've said before, I think there's definitely a disconnect between the developers and the executives. The developers just want the best for the games they work on, whether it is Payday or Baxter, whatever it is. I think the devs have a lot of passion. I've seen it firsthand. I'm not saying that to gaslight people. I genuinely mean it. When I go into that studio, I just see a bunch of people who really want the best for the games they make. But of course, they can only do what they're given the resources, time, and funding for by the executive. So there definitely is that disconnect. I think the more time that passes and the more of these decisions that don't work out for the fans or the developers, or don't work out at least with them in mind, the greater that disparity becomes, and it gets reflected in things like offline mode not turning up when it should. File name empty says, to be completely honest, I think offline mode has been swept under the rug and Starbreeze is in panic mode regarding the community's rightful insistence. As a result, they're trying to delay the deadline as much as possible before addressing the issue, so as not to alarm veteran players and to avoid stirring up a wave of negativity, which would be entirely justified given it was promised through Operation Medibag within the community. This is, among other reasons, to prevent negatively influencing new players and therefore potential DLC customers who join thanks to Payday 3 being free via PS Plus. Sorry, English is not my first language, try my best. Mate, you type better than some people whose English is their first language. And that actually is a very good point that even I had not considered. Across February, Payday 3 is free on PS Plus, and I think Starbreeze are hoping that not only will it bring in new players, which it seems to have been doing, I've seen boosts in some of my videos because of PS players turning up and comments, etc., but more importantly, they're probably hoping it will translate into DLC sales. And why would you buy DLC if you start looking into a game that you find out is just just had an offline mode canned. So it's very fair to assume that they've said in the coming weeks, and those coming weeks could be when the PS Plus games are refreshed at the start of March. It could even be when Armor 2.0 gets added. Once that's out, maybe then they go, okay, so now this is out, we want to be honest, offline mode isn't coming. It could be as simple as that. I do agree, though, that it feels like they're trying to sweep it under the rug, at least for as long as they can, because it feels like it's not coming. That's the kind of impression I'm getting too. So I'm sad that you're saying that, even though I agree, because it just makes me feel like, obviously, my opinion isn't alone in that. And right underneath, AC saying cancel, they're afraid to acknowledge it, probably is what's happening here. But let's see a couple more takes. Take Dale's users, I think that it must be on the way regardless of delays. Even if it's the very last update they make, I don't see the team being okay with leaving it as a game which you physically could not play because you couldn't connect to the servers. Say what you want about Star Race, but they're really clearly not Ubisoft or EA. That is a fair point. It could well be that they just don't plan to do offline mode until Payday 3 eventually gets sunsetted, whether that's the end of the year, in 2 years, 3 years, whatever it may be. Maybe they'll do it then. And I hope that at the very least, if Payday 3 does get canned, that they add offline mode as a last thing. That would be a good farewell to it if they choose to do it. I just hope we don't get to a farewell anytime soon. There's definitely messages here with very similar vibes. John Alexander saying they probably have 1 to 2 guys working on it, won't confirm anything to buy the small team enough time. Or Stephen without the T saying, I believe they tried adding it during Medic Bag, but realised it wasn't so simple, so they made a quick fix to the problem, hoping to make a proper offline mode down the road, like solo mode. Makes sense. But will they though? The question remains unanswered, and the secrecy around it is not a good sign. They said they'll address it in the coming weeks, but I wonder when. Yeah, or the game's dead, end of an era, for real, for real. I mean, look, there are people out there still very positive for Payday 3's future, and honestly, more power to you. I'm glad you still exist, because I really don't blame anyone like myself who doesn't have a lot of faith in the future of Payday 3. Not because of the devs, but because of where the game's been left with the developers thanks to the executives, you know? Honestly, we should have a swear jar for the word executive. I feel like we'd all be rich by this point. But I don't blame people for feeling negative. I'm glad that people still have hope, but the general consensus, and it keeps getting stronger, is that people don't have a lot of faith in where this game is going, and it's such a shame, because they really were starting to turn things around, but unfortunately the game wasn't reflecting that in sales, etc. So who knows what the next year offers? Who knows if offline mode will be a part of what the next year offers? We just don't know. If you want me to be honest, like I said, I don't think it's coming, but I would love to be surprised, and that is my takeaway from this. You know, I'm kind of going into it with, you know, let's relate it to a nerdy thing, because you know I love to do that. Have you seen the backdrop of my camera? But as MJ said in Spider-Man No Way Home, expect disappointment and you'll never be disappointed. That's how I'm feeling with offline mode. I don't normally match that quote because I like to try and be optimistic, but it feels appropriate for this particular situation. If we do get something good, it'll be great. It'll be a lovely surprise if offline mode does work. But based on the lack of communication around it, where Payday 3 is at from a dev standpoint, thanks to those executive decisions, and the way Almir addressed it in this, feeling very on the fence and kind of saying, you know, how it will happen, in what way, if it will happen, it's all very up in the air, and the unwillingness to commit to any kind of concrete information about it, at least up until now, over a year after Operation Medic Bag was announced, it doesn't inspire confidence, and that's the sad but very true reality of the situation that we're in. So I'm going to wrap up there. I hope that's been an insightful video for you in the history of offline mode and whether or not it will come. Please let me know what you think in the comment section below as to whether you think offline mode is going to come to Payday 3 or not. I'd love to know your thoughts. But if you've enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up. I would greatly appreciate it. And make sure you click subscribe if you haven't already to stay up to date with all future content on the channel. I'll see you all very soon with a new one. Until then, look after yourselves, stay safe, and thank you for watching. As always, much appreciated. Enjoy the rest of your week.